Elon Musk very publicly doesn't believe that Lidar, which is the main product that you make and service that you provide, is ultimately going to be necessary to autonomous driving.
Yeah. Well, I think our other 50 partners and the majority of major automakers that we're working with would certainly disagree. But
hey, Andrew, welcome to The Market is Open.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me.
Yes, so we wanted to talk about Luminar, and Lidar has been getting a lot of buzz, so that's Lidar. There's a lot of definitions of what it stands for, but what we can say is there's a lot of these new Lidar companies coming out, and one of the more interesting ones is this company, Luminar. And we wanted to see, you can actually sort of buy their stock right now, and let's bring that up. So you can buy it through this SPAC, Gores, and SPACs typically go public at $10, and then from what I've read, if you don't like the SPAC, you can usually redeem your shares at $10, and if you do, then the price goes up. Right now, it seems to be doing not that as much as you would think, given that we're in the roaring 20s right now, where anything that seems like a plausible investment idea just goes up like 7,000%. But the fact that I'm not sure if the market is missing this right now, just because we'll go into if you should buy the stock at the end, but I'm a little surprised. What do you think in the roaring 20s where you sort of announce a SPAC and then you could see it didn't really go up as much as you would think, given like 5 days ago, they didn't know that they were going to get Luminar Technologies, and now investors sort of know, and the stock popped to about $12 and now it's back to 11. So do you think the market is sort of unaware of this? But what I will say is in the short term, given how everything's moving, like NIO company, which is now up 100% in like the last week, the roaring 20s, like this seems like if you're a day trader that the stock probably will pop to 20 in the next like couple of weeks or something, or in the next couple, or by the end of year, based on the way everything with any sort of plausible idea is popping 100%.
Yeah, do you think the SPAC game has sort of played out a little bit where the first one was crazy, and then the second one, the tortoise one, whatever shell was going up, and now it's like, okay, now every single company is trying to get on the SPAC train and the investors aren't really having it?
I would think it might be the opposite, where earlier I was sort of skeptical of the Nikolai SPAC because it had barely been done. But since then, I was saying it's a red flag not a red flag, a flag that you need to check into. But now that every company seems to be doing it, and the benefits are you don't need this like year-long roadshow. And I think companies are seeing, hey, the market is so freaking hot right now. We got to get on the market as soon as possible. So especially for these like tech ideas, everyone has become sort of this futurist in this market. Like I see the future, and they are just valuing these names so quickly that everyone is just, I got to get on the market. So I don't know if it's the market should be, if anything, accepting these SPACs a bit more.
Well, it's almost like you can get in on the IPO type thing. You can kind of get in before the company IPOs.
Exactly. So I don't really see it. It's kind of a cool thing for investors for SPACs. The downfall is like, I don't get to see financials. Like this company doesn't have any financials out. So we'll get into that a bit more. So that's something where if you really wanted to buy the stock, and this transaction is supposed to close, they say in Q4, where it turns into a stock called Laser, Lazr. So this CEO, Austin Russell, he filed his first patent at age 12. People love this these days. He dropped out of university. He got into Stanford, but it was because Peter Thiel convinced him. For some reason, Peter Thiel is against people going to university, and he gave him this like $100,000 scholarship, and he's sort of been like a Thiel prodigy, or a Thiel sort of a sponsorship guy, and continued following him. And he started this company, I believe, at like 16 years old, which is a little odd. And he's been running it. Now he's 25, and the company seems to be doing pretty well. It seems to be one of the leaders in this LiDAR tech space. Okay. So just before we get into the company, if it's interesting, it's important for shareholders to know how much the stock is worth. So the stock price right now is about at $11. So the market cap will be about a bit over like maybe $3.7 billion when this is all said and done. So that's a pretty big company. We'll sort of go into if that's worth it. This chart, if you remember, looks pretty similar to Nikola. And we sort of, here are some recent companies that did the SPAC: DraftKings, Velodyne, which is another LiDAR company, but it uses the rotating laser as opposed to more of a solid state. And it seems Luminar uses a solid state, but I couldn't pin it down completely if it's solid state or some other. It's definitely not a rotating laser, but it seems to be some sort of different technology.
So I have a question about the SPAC. If the SPAC is worth 500 million right now, and the company's going to be worth 3 billion, that doesn't mean the SPAC's going to go up to 3 billion. Like, how many shares are they going to issue in order to get there? Or we don't know yet.
No, so we know they're going to issue 338 million. So right now the company has like 40 million shares or something like that. But at the end of this transaction, there's going to be 338 million. So this series rollover is basically shares that we give. They're basically saying if we give, so at the end of the day, there's going to be 340 million shares. Times that by 80% is what? Let's just call that 250 million. So 250 million valued at $10 is, I don't know the exact price they used, and I'm using like numbers, but you can see that 250 million shares valued at $10 is about 2.7 billion. This proceeds to Luminar is cash that I guess goes out to former owners, and total deal expenses is 50 million. So you could see at the end, the shareholders would own about 12% of this 338 million shares of the company. The sponsor, I think, is adding in a bit more money, and Series X investors, I think, is Peter Thiel adding in a bit more money. And then current owners such as Austin and Russell will be owning 80%. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so if it ends up being like a $4 billion company and the shareholders of the current share price of the current SPAC own about 12%, then that would be worth about 480 million. And that's less than what the current SPAC price is at.
Yeah, so you could just take 4 billion divided by 338 and see what price that is. And then if you buy it now, you would make money. Well, if there's 338 million shares outstanding and the price is 4 billion, well, and you're buying right now at $10, like you're still going to be an owner in the new company. You're just going to own a share. Like it's still like a 1-for-1 conversion. So that if you think it's worth 4 billion, the stock should be worth 1180 a share right now. Like it's kind of like a split or a reverse split, or you own less shares. Like it's like a massive dilution event. But even if you dilute something by, a lot, as long as that value grows, then, you'll be up money sort of thing.
Okay, so if the total company is going to be worth $3.388 billion, that's correct?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, and then the current SPAC is going to own the entire value of the SPAC is going to end up being 11.8% of the company? Mm-hmm. Or is it more than that?
It seems that these guys would own 11.8% of the company.
Okay, so if it's 11.8, then I multiply 11.8 times 3.388, and I would get the value according to this market cap. Today's value.
Yeah, it should all be the same price though. I'm just saying like an easier way to do it is this way you said at 4 billion divided by 338, because if you're saying that will be the value afterwards, then we know the value will be 1180 a share, and you're buying at, like, nothing happens to your shares when it gets transferred over. It just changes ticker symbols. Like there's no difference.
Right.
The fact is the value is between 3 and 4 billion, right now, and shareholders will make money. If you think it's worth 4 billion, then as I said, the stock will be worth closer to 12 a share. If you think it's worth, less, then $11 a share is too high. What I was saying is we'll get into the valuation at the end, but given that we're in the roaring 20s right now, I'm kind of surprised it hasn't popped more. Just to show, we did some research. Velodyne, this company, is also doing a SPAC right now, and they're doing a SPAC through this company Graph, and you could see sort of the nice pop that they got. And I don't have it in front of me right now, but they did this sort of SPAC at a much lower IPO price, despite being sort of the innovator and lead. I don't want to say innovator, sorry. They were the first to market. Everyone knows Velodyne, who's followed the industry for a long time, because they were one of the first ones to make this rotating Lidar. And this value of the company is now worth about 3 billion. So Luminar's value, you could say, is, hey, it's a little expensive. This company, Velodyne, when it closes this acquisition at the end of this quarter, will be worth less than Luminar. And Velodyne has, 670 million of cumulative sales since 2005, and Luminar has 0. But as you can see, look how much we've popped in the last month. Like the SPAC people came in at $10, $10, you can see flat. That's standard SPAC price from what I'm reading, that you always buy into a SPAC at $10. Then if you like the deal, you can take your shares and then get them converted. If you don't, usually you have the option to redeem your shares at $10 worth it because it's funded with cash. So the SPAC usually lets you get out. So it seems like an interesting investment vehicle, but you can see this sort of nice pop when Velodyne was announced. So that's just a comparable company did it. Okay. So we've seen SPACs this year are up to 79. Prior year was only 59, 46, 34. So it's growing in popularity. It's just, it's interesting how many companies are using SPACs. Okay, so let's go into what do we think of this company. Right now, the company has over 350 employees. A lot of people are saying this is one of the most crowded fields. So we did a video on Mobileye and Tesla self-driving challengers, and sort of Amnon Shashua articulated why a lot of people do LiDAR is because it's very easy to do in the sense you can get to rapid prototyping. So investors are sort of dumb and they want to see a prototype before they invest. So it's hard to do a camera version because you're just not going to be able to get it up and running. I mean, Tesla's, works okay, but they're 3 or 4 years in with all that data. And, imagine a company without all that data. Like, it's just impossible. So most companies go the LiDAR route, and now it's a crowded field, but a lot of them are using different technologies. So spinning LiDAR units are expensive. So Velodyne is sort of less interesting to me just because it specializes in spinning units, though they say the cost could be around $4,000 right now. But then they have these solid state units. Let's see, the next slide, they have this Veloray solid state unit. The accuracy seems a little lower. They say up to 3 centimeters. They tell us the range up to 200 meters. Yeah. Okay. So anyways, so this is all Velodyne sensors, which is under that Graph company. And they do have a new solid state, but most of theirs are spinning lasers. I'm not as happy or confident to invest in a spinning laser company just because to me, solid state seems to be the future, less moving parts. It should be cheaper. The fact is solid state companies.
Moving ones break like 10 times a day.
Yeah. And if you're in a car company, you don't want to have to replace you need your LiDAR to last for a while. And we've already seen the cost of spinning lasers were $70,000 at the beginning. They're coming down a lot in price, but we're already seeing the solid state LiDAR is much, lower in price. The thing is they're not 360 degrees generally, so you need a couple of them, but usually the cost is so much lower and they should last so much longer that they're attractive. So in a way, Luminar is already more attractive to me, even though it has a higher value. So let's see what's next. So one thing we wanted to talk about is they seem to have missed their earlier promises already, which is sort of a negative if you're going to invest in the company. So this article says it'll allow its factory in Florida to build 10,000 scanners this year. So if you see this is 2017, it doesn't seem like Luminar has built anything yet. So just to know that right now they're targeting production to start 2022. It seems to ramp up 2024, but it's like the company has already sort of missed promises. I don't really like that. I mean, Tesla does that, but Tesla is at least delivered. So you could say, well, they missed promises, but they've eventually delivered and Tesla has a track record. But now you'd be investing in a company that says 10,000, but has no track record sort of thing. So that's kind of risky. So one thing Luminar talks and praises itself on, but the wavelength that they use is interesting. And maybe you could talk a bit about different wavelengths. But so the majority of LiDAR manufacturers use a 905 nanometer wavelength. So this is just the visible spectrum. And then where 905 is, and then 1550 is a longer wavelength. And Luminar says that this 1550 is a better wavelength because if it were to hit you directly in the eye, it wouldn't cause retina damage. And there's some people say 905 nanometers has to be limited to 100 meters in range because it could cause eye damage. So it's an interesting debate that I do want to talk to a few of these companies about to sort of get their claims. Luminar is talking about the range that they can go further and more high power because they use this 1550 nanometer, which is sort of the newest of technologies, while most companies have been using 905. So I know Andrew will like that fact that LiDAR could cause eye damage in the 905 spectrum that most companies use if it's more than 100 meters in range.
They're just not going to allow that. They're going to want something that doesn't cause eye damage because the Velodyne ones don't cause eye damage, I don't think.
Yeah, so that's what Velodyne says, but Velodyne uses the 905 nanometers. But Luminar makes a big point of pointing this out that they talk about it in the roadshow that their 1550 can go longer or further. So it's possible that something you get less dense, rich images if you're shooting it far. Innoves talks about how they can get far dense images with 905 nanometer, but Luminar is saying this is the key selling point. And this is sort of something that we need to ask around on. So like before, putting all your money in Luminar because they use 1550, which to me, it seems like an odds competitive advantage. Like they're not the only company to use this wavelength. Innoves says they use 905 nanometer because it's the most mature, but it seems like a lot of companies would adopt 1550 wavelength if that was the only way you could shoot a long range radar. And one thing interesting, if you remember, Andrew, we watched an interview with Amnon Shashua, and he said you couldn't do highway driving right away. I think this sort of relates to that in the sense that if range is capped, then you don't have enough time. So if you're going 40, 50 meters per second on the highway and you can only shoot out 100 meters, sort of it limits LiDAR's ability as a redundant sensor on the highway. So this sort of confirms maybe there are some limitations on the LiDAR, or at least in terms of how accurate you can get a 905 nanometer at a far distance if you have to shoot out weaker laser pulses. What do you think about that? Is there some logic you have to shoot out a weaker pulse? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I guess if you're relying on that for long distances, yeah, I don't know. Like it should give you enough range to give you enough time before you get there. So if that's a problem with the highway driving, then I don't know. I think they'll be able to solve that.
That they should be able to get their range with 905 nanometer.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the wavelength, but yeah, they should be able to figure out the correct combination of wavelength and whatever they need to
yeah, right. So what Luminar basically says is because they can shoot out a higher power laser. So what is true is Luminar will always be able to shoot out a higher power laser, assuming it doesn't affect your eye, because they're at a wavelength that supposedly doesn't affect your eye, though there were some articles that a camera could have been affected. In the sense, one guy said my camera was broken after hit by a Luminar laser, but then he threw out the camera and he didn't check it. So it's like hard to trust them when, if someone breaks your camera, generally you probably shouldn't throw it out. Not to say I wouldn't be that dumb and throw my camera out right away, but like it seems a little suspicious. So I'm not going to count that against them, but it's an interesting argument. And I can't remember if I said, but Innoves says they can do far distances with their length. And a lot of these companies claim big range anyways, despite this gap. But all I'm saying is this 905 nanometer, it supports something that we saw Shashua Amnon of Mobileye say that was a little suspicious, that the range would be limited. And it seems maybe he's sort of nervous. That interview we saw was from 2018. So he might be nervous about long range of LiDAR. I'm not sure how good the camera is also at long range. So that's something, if you want to bet on Luminar, that's what they're telling you is their value add. Okay. Mm-hmm. So this is just a picture of Luminar, what they say they can look like. It's great. Okay. So one thing Luminar is saying they can get the cost down to $1,000, $500, and maybe even $100 in the future. So in a couple of years ago, or 2019, they raised $250 million and they had a valuation of $900 million. So you can see with the excitement with the SPAC, we're getting a valuation of like 4 times that within a year. So investors should also be thinking about that. So this is Luminar has a couple of sensors. They have this like Hydra sensor and Iris sensor. So the Hydra sensor is like a little big. It looks, no moving parts. And then this is another picture of their Hydra, and then this is their production Iris. Sorry, it's not their production sensor; it's their prototype sensor. It looks kind of sleek. What do you think of the look at the top?
It's better than the Velodyne one.
Yeah, I think so.
Most people who buy a car want to integrate it with the car.
Yeah, I think I took a picture of the Innoves one. The Innoves one is like really beautiful. Like this would be fine if that's what your
best one is one you wouldn't see at all.
Yeah, so so here's another picture of it. I think you can. Okay, so I'm not sure which ones we're seeing, but you're seeing that. Okay,
Also, they put it above the car because.
Okay, so by the way, so here's the Innoves one. What do you think? Like, look how it goes right into this part of the car.
Yeah, that's where most cars have like their radar and stuff.
So beautiful, eh? Like that's how Innoves sees it, and that's in their BMW.
Yeah, you'd have to put a bunch of them around the car, but I thought they would have to put it in front of the like the windshield wiper or something because it'll be blocked by dirt and stuff. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know with Waymo they have a way to clean the scanner,
Like a mini wiper or something.
a wiper. So it'll be interesting to see what the companies do for that. Okay, so let's just look at this slide. I don't know if, so they say 120 degrees field of view. So that's the horizontal field of view. So that's if you're looking horizontally, how far you could see. 30 degrees is vertical, which seems to cover like pretty much what a human sees outside a car. They're telling you the max range is 500 meters. Camera-like resolution. They're the only company I've seen in LiDAR do this 300 points per square degree. I don't know what that means. You know what that means? I don't know what it means, but
No, but if they're saying camera-like resolution, shouldn't it be better than a camera?
yeah, well, they're saying nothing's, I think everyone agrees nothing's as good as a camera in terms of resolution. That's the big advantage of the camera is it's the most densely rich picture. The problem is it's difficult to do, as we discussed. This is a view of the LiDAR companies if you wanted to see. So MEMS is these mirror-based LiDAR. That's where Innoviz is, who I think is the most interesting company in this space, but there's no way to invest in them. They say Luminar is under other mechanical sensing, though it's unclear how it's different. And then we have the multi-channel macro scanning. So Velodyne has a few different ones. I like how Waymo's not even on the list, but it's, I think flash LiDAR is really expensive too. So
Waymo doesn't make LiDAR though.
Oh, I thought they made this like honeycomb sensor.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah, but they don't sell it to the, they're so odd. They don't sell it to anyone. Yeah, they're like, we'll sell it to anyone not in the auto industry. So maybe that's why. Waymo's just like, they're such a joke overall. Okay, next slide. So these are their financial projections. So now we're going to talk in if you should buy this stock. So it looks pretty good. They're going to say they're going to have 837 million in 2025. But split between hardware and software was 630,000 units. So they're saying the price will still be over. Actually, they're not saying the price will be over 1,000 because it's split between hardware and software. They're basically saying the hardware price will probably be about 600-700. So that's one thing. We'll let them have the benefit of the doubt. For now, we're not going to critique anything. We talked about the Innoviz. So here's what they say: industry-leading performance, 250 meters of range, and then max resolution. I just don't know if I could trust the slide though, because the slide, just because I went through Innoviz, and it's like, here's just Innoviz pulling up. Innoviz says they have 10 centimeters to 250. So they say 10 centimeters because we could detect close. They show 115 times 25 field of view. So that's why I think this one is the Innoviz one. But then they showed the range for Innoviz is only 120 meters. So it's just, I'm not sure I can trust anything from Luminar in their slideshow. Obviously, they showed theirs is the only one that does everything. And then they say delayed series production ADAS, but I don't know what they mean by delayed because their Innoviz is the only one in production right now, and they expect to be on the BMW next year, while Luminar says they'll be on Volvo, which is a much smaller car company. It has like a big name, but Volvo's not such a big car company, and they expect to be on the Volvo. I guess before we get into would we buy the stock, I guess, what are your thoughts on, these LiDAR companies? And
yeah, somebody brought up a good point in one of our videos. I think it must have been the Mobileye one.
Yeah.
I want to know if the LiDAR sensors will interfere with each other. I think we talked about that a little bit, but like I'm not sure. Like if you're passing another car on the street and you won't be able to see anything for a bit.
Here, so Luminar says no interference. Oh, but they're talking about it. I don't know. I think we need to do more research before we talk about that point. It just doesn't seem interesting until we have some like solid evidence that, this is a real problem. I don't know. Like it just seems like a weird thing that, you would do a technology that would then work with one car on the road.
Yeah. The cameras don't have that problem though. So
yeah, but wouldn't radar have that problem or no?
Yeah, radar might have that problem too, but I guess you might have a larger selection of weight because the thing with LiDAR is that it needs to be visible light that doesn't damage your eye, or not visible light, but either infrared or visible light or something. Whereas I guess with radar, you have a much wider selection to choose from.
Yeah. I don't. Maybe I'll look through a few articles on that after.
Radar,
I'm just like without like some solid research, it just doesn't seem like it's like if you had like solid research, it seems worth talking about. It's just it's an interesting thing to look into before you buy a LiDAR company if this is going to be sort of an existential threat to the industry that hey, we're developing a technology that can only be used by a few cars, sort of thing.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are going to be using LiDAR because every other company besides a handful of them are going to be probably relying on LiDAR. So it's good to have a bunch of suppliers for that kind of hardware.
All the companies I'm reading about, BMW, it's in addition to the Mobileye sensor, like all the real serious OEMs that aren't, these dumb companies like Waymo, it's an additive additional sensor. Okay. So then to buy Luminar stock or not, I don't think you should buy it. So I think about it like this. So revenue, they say the TAM, which is like a big thing in tech markets. You say how big the market is going to be. I don't think I have a picture here of what the TAM will be. They say 150 billion for the whole market. Obviously, this will grow a lot. They say 2030, sorry. And then, but if you think about it like this, so they say their sensor will be worth, let's say $100, sell for $100 in 2030. There's only 100 million vehicles sold. So if that was sold by $100, that would only be 10 billion of revenue if they had 100% of the market. And obviously vehicle sales are going to drop a lot because if you have robo-taxis, I'm not going to buy a car. And so I think vehicle sales will drop by half. So then the market's only 5 billion. And are they going to have 100% of the market? So the whole valuation that you're basing it on is them telling you that we're going to have a lot of software revenue. And I don't really see why they're going to have a lot of software revenue. They're going to have the issue that, you know, Mobileye has been working with all these companies. They have so much data. This company's starting from ground zero, and they've been working on their hardware this whole time. And you're going to tell me that, you know, you guys are going to have all this software revenue? Like, and, you know, this, yeah, I mean, sure, the 2025 revenue projection could be accurate for their hardware. I just don't really have much hope to be betting on their software. So I think it's pretty overvalued. I mean, if you're thinking, hey, maybe you guys could have 5 billion of revenue at $100, at $200, maybe 10 billion of revenue in 2030, and then you're valuing it at 3 billion today with maybe 20% operating margins. And if their whole business is just hardware, that's not such a good business either. Like the value is always in the software. So I don't really see, they have no demos. If you go to Innovez, they have one presentation. They have more demos. They're going on BMW next year. So I would be more interested in them if they were to do some sort of SPAC, but they're from Israel, so it's unlikely. But Luminar, I think, is pretty overvalued, though I do like it over Velodyne if you wanted to make some sort of speculative play. I was looking at it, but I wouldn't personally invest in it.
Is there software? Is it for autonomous driving? Is that what they're going to be selling?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just hard. It's hard to trust, you know, that they're going to have an autonomous driving software where they charge the OEMs.
They don't have any hardware yet.
Yeah, they don't even have any hardware. And where are you going to get the data to, you know, do the software sort of thing? It's like, okay, you're going to accumulate it with your Lidar that doesn't exist and you have no sales on. So
they would have to put some other device like a cell chip on it also.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much more expensive that'll be, but
you know, that's not going to be a super high margin business. But what we're seeing with Tesla is, you know, if full self-driving is a big thing, that is, you know, that could be a massive margin business sort of thing. So, you know, this company, all their valuation is based on.
It's almost like there's like a tech bubble in you know, the driving world right now, where everything related to driving is just skyrocketing. And it's like funding these companies, and eventually, I mean, maybe the bubble will pop, maybe it won't, but either way, these companies are going to get funded, and then with that money, they're going to, you know, find applications for whatever they're working on, and it might not even be in cars, but I mean, people hope that it will be. But
Yeah,
we saw that with the tech bubble, and we saw it with like, I don't know, 3D.
Yeah, like I find like, at least like for Tesla, and I've been sort of against Tesla's valuation. If you remember my Eisman video, it was sort of just because what could happen reasonably for Tesla. I was sort of saying, hey, if they're just a car company, the value's 1,000. But then a lot of people rightly pointed out in the comments that like Tesla is a leader in autonomous driving, and autonomous will be this 150 billion TAM market, and Tesla probably will play in that market. The problem is then Tesla's value could become any amount you really want it to be. So Tesla can, you know, cycle between a lot of ranging values, and you could probably argue very low values, or you can argue very high. You can just argue basically infinitely high values based on the TAM of this self-driving market. But then you get to like a company like NIO, and it's just using Mobileye technology, and they're probably going to be more aggressive and stuff like that. So they have the ability to get robo-taxis, but it's just a little odd to me that you would buy, you know, NIO at this price. And, you know, they sold 10,000 cars, and it seems they outsourced to JAC the body of the car. So they don't really have, and then they cut R&D. It's just an odd stock that you would want to buy.
Yeah, okay, well, they sold a car. I mean, what's it? Nikola's valued it higher, and they haven't sold any. They haven't even made it a car.
Nikola's less now, but it doesn't really matter. I agree with you. If I had to pick, I would definitely buy.
No,
Thank you guys for watching. Please hit the like button.